everyone doing? Okay, you guys have clearly never been to Black church before.
No.
How is everyone doing? Oh, awesome. I know that we're the only people standing between you and cocktails, so we'll try and keep it brief but informative. My name is Tosh, Ernest. I'm head of something called Access to Innovation at Silicon Valley Bank, and we are focused on banking women and people of the global majority at Silicon Valley Bank globally. And I am joined by Rami from Miami, that's how you say it, and Mandy from Latinx VC and Black VC, respectively. And we're here to talk about the state of venture for people of the global majority. So we're just actually going to start right there and ask these two wonderful CEOs and presidents what they're seeing right now in the venture market. And because ladies go first, Mandy, we're going to start with you. Tell us what you're seeing in Black venture right now.
A lot of Black people, which I love. Right now in venture is one of the times that we're going to look back on in 10 years and wonder why we didn't get in sooner or why we didn't do it sooner. If anyone remembers Uber or Yelp, where I worked very early on, all of those companies were started in a pretty bad recession, 2007, 2008, and they did amazingly and changed the industry. And so right now what is happening is a lot of Black fund managers who invest in startups, as you know, are starting to invest in the next amazing Black founders, the next women's healthcare system. And so there are really, really amazing things happening in this ecosystem that I just feel honored to be a part of.
Thank you.
I can say more later, of course.
Yes, of course, we're going to dive more into it. And Rami?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing is you're seeing a lot of newer funds be founded, both on the Latino and the Black side. And so that's really exciting for new managers to get these opportunities. I think one thing that's still lacking is some of the larger funds increasingly hiring diverse folks. And so that's somewhere, we can talk a little bit more about that, but that's somewhere where both of our organizations are trying to make progress.
Yep.
Yeah, and speaking of leaning into changing demographics in the global majority, some really interesting stats for you. By 2025, America is actually going to see its last graduating class of majority white students from high school. By 2033, America is going to start to see a majority minority workforce. And by 2042, America is going to count itself as a nation where a majority of the population is part of the global majority. So every time you hear me say global majority, that's what I'm talking about, because Black and brown people are the global majority. And I think that what we want to start to do is really start to understand and help investors understand that there is alpha to be made here. It's not charity. Rihanna inventing, makeup, my skin shade wasn't charity. She's a billionaire now, and it's not because of her singing, although the Super Bowl will be great. It's because she decided that there was money sitting in Black women's pockets that nobody was investing in. And so as we become more and more the global majority, people's solution for challenges they find in their communities, and if 50% of America is solutioning for something and you're not investing in it, you're leaving money on the table. And so I'd love to start with you, Rami. How can we help investors understand that there is alpha to be made here with all that dry powder that's sitting around?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to segment the market. There's 3 different types of funds that you're seeing, Black and Latino founders start. There's funds that are focused just on the diversity issue, and there's a lot of secular trends that I know you talked about. There's funds that are majority diversity, but not only diverse focus. And the view there is, hey, we have a really strong network of diverse folks, and so we want to invest in a lot of those folks, but we don't want to exclusively invest in that. And then the third bucket is you have fund managers, myself included. My day job is I run a Series B to Series D venture fund, who we don't have a diverse focus, but my diverse stats are better than your average fund because the work that I do on the side in the Latino community, we work very closely with Black VC and other organizations, means that my average friend group and business network is a little more diverse than your average other venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road. And so, I think what's really important is for folks to be investing across these strategies. You're going to have winners and losers in all the strategies, and what you tend to see, just like all other venture-backed industries, is the winners emerge and build upon that and really build enduring firms. You've seen some of the top private equity firms in the tech world be built by both Black and Latino founders, and I think that to the extent folks invest across those strategies, there will be winners that emerge similarly.
Can you repeat the question?
So we're just talking about this opportunity to invest in
thank
the
you.
global majority, and that there is alpha to be made here. And I really liked what Rami said about these 3 buckets. I think a lot of people create a diversity fund and they're like, okay, we've done our part. But what do we always tell people when they invest? We say, have a diversified portfolio and take a long-term view. But then when it comes to Black and brown people, we don't take a long-term view. We expect to harvest in the year we planted the seed, but we didn't even till the soil.
Yep.
And we have this short-termism because if it doesn't create what we're looking for within a month, sometimes we're done with it. And so, again, diversify and take a long-term view. But yes.
I have so many comments on that. Thank you for reminding me of the question. The main one is that in venture, everything is always based around pattern recognition. You only have 24 hours in a day. You are, I talk to a lot of people who should be retiring and they're still taking 6 to 7 pitches a day, which I think is wild. But essentially what we're doing is looking for pattern recognition. And if we already have a set bias where we're recognizing patterns, it's going to be really hard to make that jump to actually find innovation if you're looking for the same damn pattern every time. And so I come from the Bay, San Francisco Bay. Both of my parents were in tech. I grew up in tech. And there were a lot of the same people, and it kind of reminds me of like Fast and Furious. Just like the same movie kind of over and over again. Like the action's great, like there's a lot of bombs going off, it's cool. People are creating, new technologies, but I'm not seeing, I was not before, I've seen a huge boom with fund managers of color, that there's really amazing innovation coming out. And I think that's part of a lot of the issue that I see right now. And at the same time, like, well, sorry about it. Like, we'll be out here kicking butt, bringing in new innovation, and others will just have to keep up.
Right. And, you mentioned about seeing the same movie play over and over again. I think I read somewhere that this was probably the largest year for Black founders in terms of fundraising, something like 400 million.
Yep.
But then Adam Newman raised all that just in one round. And so when people have that pattern recognition, they keep investing in the same thing over and over again. And yet we have all these wonderful innovators barely scratching the surface of what one man can raise in his first round. Which brings me to this challenge we have with what the capital allocators look like, and therefore what they invest in because of the pattern recognition. So 92% of all capital allocators in the VC ecosystem are white men, and 40% of them, obviously, probably no surprise, graduated from Stanford or Harvard. And so when we think about having people that understand and recognize the patterns of solutions that are upcoming in the innovation economy, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about how we can tackle the challenge with representation in the venture ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's on all stakeholders to kind of be more open-minded and open the net of what they look for. That's not just VCs, that's the LPs that invest in VCs hiring more diverse. It's founders hiring more diverse. If you look at where VCs come from, they tend to be either former operators or they tend to have grown up at another venture capital firm. And so it's on the venture firms to make sure that they are training the talent, diverse talent, and then it's on the startups to make sure they're hiring the best talent as well. One of the things that I love about the venture industry and investing in general is there is a scorecard. It's not subjective. The problem is people aren't getting a chance in the first place. And so to the extent in 10 years from now, as you mentioned, a lot of funds are getting, and we both talked about a lot of funds are getting started now. In 10 years, we're going to be able to judge, who did well, who did it. And, I think the numbers generally have played out very favorably for smaller managers. That's not a race comment. And I think you're going to see similarly, a lot of the underrepresented managers will do well and outperform. And so I think that's when you'll start seeing more change. But it's across all of the ecosystem, seeing more diversity, seeing more women, and I think that's how you drive change.
Yeah. What I've seen that's been really, really, again, really, really amazing is the way that the community of color comes together and the way we collaborate when we get a no, because we get hella no's. Black women, founders and even fund managers will pitch 100 capital allocators and maybe get a yes, whereas the average white man will pitch five funders or 5 LPs before they get a yes. So it is very much that pattern recognition. And as you're saying, Tosh, we are working within what seems like scarcity because we have such a small piece of the overall pie. But all that we're doing is making that piece of pie bigger amongst ourselves and also widening the entire pie so that more of us can come in. And again, having folks, something else I wanted to mention around like having more representation, if you're working at an institutional fund or a fund of funds and you don't have representation for the community or of the communities that you want to address or get into in terms of innovation, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And even then, so there's this whole assimilation process that often happens within venture when folks are the onlyist at their firm. They also have to come back to the emerging managers and the founders to be like, oh yeah, this is what we do. I'm not a person who's just going to sit and look at numbers all day and like not remember that these people are humans, that they have different experiences. And I think that's something that's been really cool to experience that we've been doing at Black VC, is bringing folks together from all over the venture ecosystem to share those experiences, to make sure that we all know that we're humans, that when we go back to our offices, we can fight that fight as the onlyest in the room.
And so just thinking in real practical ways, we're saying we want to see more representation. What are some of the practical ways that people can lean into to maybe tap into emerging talent, all the way from emerging talent maybe straight out of a HBCU right through to changing the face of the board members? Could you share some of those solutions with us?
Yeah, I think the reality is in a capitalist society, money has power. And so I think it's money speaking to power. So I think on the VC side, it's really LPs pushing their the VCs they invest in to be more diverse, especially at the larger funds. If you're a 4-person fund, you've got one diverse person, you're diverse. You have 0, you're not. It's hard to push change at smaller funds.
Don't you love that?
But at the larger funds, there's really, where they make a lot of hiring decisions, there's more opportunity to do that. And then similarly, founders, I have founders who reach out to me to personally invest, even though it's not a fit for my fund, because they want to have a Latino person in. And then I think there needs to be a change in mindset. One thing I've always pushed with my partners, and they tell everyone, is I view my culture and background as an advantage. I was raised by a single mom. I tell people when they say, what's your job? One of my partners is the former CFO of Apple. They're like, why are you a partner? I'm like, because I'm the hustler.
Damn right.
And then in terms of network, sometimes I'll bring in someone. They're like, how did you meet this CEO? I'm like, well, kind of know a lot of the Latin CEOs because there's not that many of us. So and they tend to be extra helpful. I know the Black community operates very similarly. And so I think, one thing in that mindset is not just pushing, hey, you need to push diversity, because you investing in the younger talent is what's going to create change over the long term. But it's also, I think, an asset because there's a lot of untapped networks that you can be tapping into.
Yeah. I've been doing diversity stuff for a long time, and the thing that gets a lot of people caught is they want to see change, but they don't actually want to change at all.
Hey, say that again, sister.
Yes. we want to see change, but we don't actually want to change. I mean, I don't usually. It's a daily struggle. But the reason I say that is because, what we're talking about are the end. So representation is the end. And oftentimes when I'm in white spaces, that's the means to an end. When if you can't get to that end first, then how can you expect to have the next goal, which is to, really get into that amazing innovation that you can't see right now? And so a lot of it, as we know people who look like us. We also happen to know a lot of people who are white because we've had to exist in white spaces. And so, as you said, Rami, the really great advantage that we have is that we can code switch, we can exist in all of these different worlds. Whereas, sorry, white folks, oftentimes it's harder to do that because if you are not in a practice of getting to know people who don't look like you, you are not going to be able to get any of that special talent that you don't know anything about. So if you don't know what you don't know, you have to be ready to get your butt kicked in these rooms where people will, preface your name with white guy or white lady, and it's fun. And I think the way to do that is to remember that this whole racism thing is not your fault as an individual. It is a system. It is a system that has gotten us to where we are, and it is a technology, in fact, that has evolved over time, and we are participants in that system, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. So if we want to be active participants, we have to understand that we are going to shift internally, our perspectives are going to change, but we will reap the benefits once we do that.
Can I add one thing about prejudices? Race is only one type of thing. I think the point you made about Harvard and Stanford, so every junior person I've ever hired did not go to an Ivy League school. I went to Wharton, so I have the Ivy League check that people give me that advantage, but I see that a lot of the smartest people I know didn't go to those schools, and a lot of times they're even hungrier. And so I think we've got to open our minds. It's not just Black, Latino, it's what schools did people go to? I can tell you a lot of people at Wharton weren't that smart.
Hey, don't get me started, dude.
And so, I think that it's opening your mind to what schools, what background someone has in terms of the work experience they have, and so what socioeconomic background they came from. And so for me, my push has always been to force people to think more about, holistically, are we looking at, someone with a different background, even when it's outside of, race or ethnicity.
Yeah, I agree with that. My mother is the smartest person I ever met, and she did not go to a four-year college, and she runs a business empire now that is extraordinary. But that was just from hustling. And I think that there's something to be said for someone that maybe doesn't have the traditional pedigree, but has the aptitude. You can teach anything, but when someone's hungry and they want it, they just work harder. And I think a lot of people of color know that, you are your parents' retirement fund. There is no 401k, right? So we have to work harder because for a lot of us, there's no generational wealth to lean back on. I know that, I'm not anymore, but I used to be I used to think of myself as my parents' retirement plan because, parents will put everything into their kids so their kids can look after them when they grow up. And so kids from diverse backgrounds, and I love what you said about just unlocking and tapping into the network they have, because you may not necessarily have the opportunity to be in those rooms, but they do, and that's a really great thing to bring into your investment roundtables, etc. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the opportunity set, because a lot of what we hear sometimes is that people want to invest in founders of color and VCs of color, et cetera, but they just can't find them. And just some stats for you, there is $69 trillion globally in the private capital markets. Less than 1.3% of it actually goes to women and people of color. And it's not a pipeline problem. 30% of all businesses last year were started by Black women. So it's not that Black women are underfounded, they're just underfunded. And so whenever people say there's a pipeline problem, I joke, and it's not for this particular audience, but it's like you found them when you wanted to sell them crappy subprime loans. So just go back there. You can find them again, you know. If you found them once for like bad products, you can find them for good stuff, okay? So let's talk about this idea that it's a pipeline problem and what you're finding.
Yeah, but we were under that rock earlier today, and we were all under rocks. That's usually where to find us, is just kind of lift up the rocks. We're under there chilling, making money, making deals happen. But I think you're absolutely right. It is doing that internal work first of like how, what am I not, what are some things that, or who is someone I trust who is a woman or a person of color, or there may be a lot of white parents who have black kids or kids of color. Start listening, just really, really listening, and inquiring about other people's experiences. And you know, you will be amazed at what you hear and how that will change your perspective. I think a lot of it has to do with working with organizations like LatinxVC and Black VC. I mean, we are all over the place. And if it's easy for us to get 30 Black fund managers into a room who all have $50 million funds or higher, you know, we might invite you one time, maybe. But there's a lot of stuff going down and stuff happening. It just has to be an effort that you make. And I want to say one thing that's really important. Not only is racism, you know, or anti-Blackness is the premise of capitalism in all of America. It's not our fault. And pardon my French. I forgot what I was going to say next. It's mom brain. It's been a long week. It is tapping into those networks, making sure that you are allowing yourself to grow, and of course, just really listening. I'm going to remember the last part of it, but Rami, I want you to go.
Was it something to do with how like the anti-Blackness actually feeds into inefficiencies in the market?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Yes. So yeah, if we are taught to discriminate and taught that Black people specifically in this country are not as smart, are not as hardworking, this is something that has been in our brains for a really long time. And I will tell you at the same time, a lot of the white people I've worked with, as soon as they hire someone who's different than them, it's like you see them change because they learned so much from people. And as you were saying, there's still a lot of people of color who are going to these, you know, historically white institutions and these Ivy League schools who are also kicking butt as well. And one thing I wanted to mention is the decolonization of wealth. And when you're talking about specific things around how to allocate to Black founders, think about allocating to Black fund managers first. Because when we think about the decolonization of wealth, what a lot of us are doing in this room is sitting in our hypothetical ivory towers and looking at data only, looking at trends. And we're going to our investor meetings and saying like, well, it doesn't fit this pattern, so therefore we're not going to even take a further look. But if we allow ourselves to come out of that and explore things a little bit differently, then, like I said, yeah, we are under rocks. We love living under rocks, but we do look pretty fabulous when we come out. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were starting to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I do want to acknowledge it sometimes is difficult to find the right diverse folks. Yeah. I've seen it firsthand in hiring, and I'm someone who's fairly connected in these networks. My wife's one of the only Latina engineers at a very large tech company, and she's seen it in their hiring. So I want to start out by acknowledging it. But where you're able to do it is when you come out and put extra work in. And so I think that's important. I mean, today, Latinos are 19% of the US, but 2% of VC professionals. And at the large firms, it's getting worse. Only 1% of junior employees are Latino or Latina. And so that's why I kind of made the point a couple of times about I really want to push the larger funds to hire diversely, because the larger funds are the pipeline for partners at those funds, but they're also the pipeline for folks who are going to start their own funds, because venture is an apprenticeship-based business. And the reality is a lot of LPs are more conservative, and they only want to fund certain folks if they spin out of a larger fund, as an example. And so, that's why I make that point there. But it is a hard thing to find folks. You know, when we first started Latinx VC, I only knew 2 other Latinos in VC. And I didn't know. I knew there was probably some more, but I didn't realize there was a lot more. I mean, we're still only 2% of the industry, but we're doing an event in Miami in December where we have 80 Latino VCs and Latina VCs from around the country together. Never thought that was even possible.
Yeah.
And I know the Black VC founding team well, and I know there's a lot more Black VCs than they knew, and it's because we're all spread around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even for us, there's effort required, but now that these networks have been built, please leverage our organizations, but, also expand your criteria and how you look when you're looking for companies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
You unlocked something in my brain. I think it was Albert Einstein that said, a problem cannot be solved with the same level of thinking with which it was created. And yes, this stuff is hard, but everyone is in this room because we do hard things. We create futures that don't exist, and then we get people who don't know that they even need those solutions to buy into them so that we can sell them on those solutions. So we are literally sitting here in this room because we do hard things. And unless we each take away a different action from today or just even from the whole conference and go back to our companies and our firms and our funds and do something different, yes, something hard, we're going to be back here having the same conversation over and over again without seeing any change in the trends. And so I'd love just to leave you as we close out with some really practical steps of what we can do. Again, a problem cannot be solved with the same level of thinking with which it was created. And so what can we be doing differently, practically, as we exit this room and get you to your cocktails? And hopefully you'll retain the memory even after a few margaritas. But thank you, Rami.
Well, as I mentioned, venture is an apprenticeship-based business, and when I talk to folks who've somewhat made it, it's all about having gotten a shot. So I was lucky early in my career, I got a shot from the former Apple executive team to start investing with them. When I talk to other managers, and not just diverse managers, just folks in general who are not from the top 1%, and even in that case, it's almost always someone gave you a shot. And so in terms of practical advice, I don't know if it's you're hiring an engineer or you're starting a company with someone or you're funding someone or you're funding a VC. I would just say give someone a shot. It won't always work out, but that's where the alpha is. And then, to the extent you are someone who's either funding companies or funding VCs or whatnot, give some other institutions a shot. And when you do give folks a shot, have the hard conversations, because I think in reality, most people want to do well, but it just requires work to do well the way institutions are set up today.
Yeah, two things that are practical. I think one, we tend to have this savior complex, and what that the outcome of that is analysis paralysis. Like, there's just so much to do. I'm so bad. Racism is so bad. What have I been doing this whole time? And we just don't act. And so it's one, remembering that concept, and then also if you're a founder or if you are running a fund and you do hire someone who's different than you, who you've never worked with before, you're not the only person who's going to develop them. And you have to be willing to invest in their development by sending them to things like this, by sending them to Black VC, by making sure they have a membership, by making sure that they can connect with people that they can have an affinity towards, who they can also trust, to make sure that they have those perspectives in and out of the workplace. And I think part of that is that we feel like we have to own the people we work with and no one else can work with them. But at the end of that, your folks are going to be so much better off because they will be developing and they have your trust that you want the best for them. So those are the two things when it comes to it all comes down to hiring.
Hey, awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up here, guys. Thank you for your time. We know we're the last session of the day, so thank you for making it and staying with us. I hope you've had a wonderful time at Venture Atlanta, and we'll see you again tomorrow. All right, take care.